Hi everyone. I wanted to share a video of the steps I did to do my first watercolor tie-dye. I am tie-dyeing a white power mesh from Blue Moon Fabrics to use for a dance costume that I designed for my friend Amy and her daughter Ivy. It will be shown at the end of the video, but this is just the process I used. I had watched a tutorial as well. And I did a few things different, mostly because I wanted a little bit of a different look, but also kind of had to improvise from a few challenges along the way, which I will mention if anybody does decide to try this. But right now I'm just getting the power mesh situated in the tray. Well, actually it's just foil wrapped around the mesh, and then I have it on top of a cookie cooling tray, and that's over top of a pan to catch the dye and the melted ice. Which now you can see I'm adding the ice on top of the mesh. It did take probably about 8 cups of ice for this size project. I have a yard of power mesh, if that helps. This is the dye I used. It went by fast. That was lilac and silver gray. It's a powder dye that I bought from Amazon and matched the project I'm working on pretty well. So I did have to, which you'll see later in the video, use a liquid fabric dye to add a little bit more gray because the silver gray was a little browner than I expected. Here you'll see that I'm adding the lilac powder to the ice. My dog's come in and out of this video a few times. They're looking at me like I'm crazy. This is the silver gray. As you can see, well, maybe you can't tell from the video, but it is a little bit more brown than I would have liked. I'm sure I should have worn gloves. It took a few days for the dye to completely come out of my hands after this, but I sometimes like to fly by the seat of my pants and don't take those silly little steps that would have been smart to do in hindsight. So I didn't have purple fingers for a few days. I did end up just sprinkling it over top. I did want the fabric to be mostly lilac, so you will see how it turns out in a little bit. So now the ice is just supposed to melt. I got a little impatient and got the hairdryer out to help, and plus I wanted to just see how it was looking, if it was the right color I wanted. I probably should have been more patient with the step to let the dye really set in the fabric. This is where I wanted to get a little bit more gray into the tie-dye. So I mixed some black fabric dye by Jacquard. I had bought it for my airbrush. I didn't use the airbrush for this part though. I actually just used a spray bottle. So this is me trying to get the white paint fabric dye out to make it a little bit more of a gray color than black. You have to add water. I'm just getting some of the extra dye off my hands. And there, you just mix it a little together. Then I put it into an old spray bottle we had actually for styling hair that we got at our friend's hair salon called Cookie Cutters. It doesn't work so well anymore. We've had it a long time, which is why I felt okay putting dye in it, because I knew my kids weren't going to use it. That would not be a fun surprise. Just make sure the dye is nice and mixed, and then I tested it out so you could see it come out in the sink. You can see out my kitchen window we have gotten a little bit of snow recently. Okay, it was kind of a windy day, so my hair's flying all over the place. I did have to tie the mesh onto the railing, and the spray bottle, since it's so old, does not work super well, but it got the job done. It's kind of hard to see in the sunlight, the variation from the purple, but it did do a nice tie-dye. You'll see it better in the end project. But I just kind of touched it up in some spots where I felt that it needed it. This costume has some of this mesh on the skirt, on the stomach panel, and then I ruched a little bit of it for the briefs, and the tie-dye really looks nice when the fabric is kind of pleated together in a nice ruching. I did heat set it a few times, also dyed my dryer purple, which I had to later clean out, so I didn't dye all of our clothes purple. I did put a color catcher in there. I know that's supposed to go in a wash cycle, but it did help kind of soak up some of the color as well. And I had to rinse it a few times, which I did not show. It was just too messy to kind of show that part. I did steam the fabric. This actually helped soften the fabric back to the flowiness of a power mesh. The dye did kind of stiffen the fabric a bit, but I also kind of thought that the steam smoothed out some of the tie-dye so it didn't look as blotchy. So I wanted to share this step with you. You can see kind of the variation in the tie-dye and how it's kind of coming together. I did have to heat set it again after this just to make sure the dye was really stayed in the fabric, because steaming it kind of loosened back up the dye. I'm not sure if I explained that right. I definitely don't want to dye the dancer skin when she's wearing the costume. So I wanted to make sure it was really set inside the fabric. Most fabric paints are heat set. You could iron as well to heat set, but I just turned the dryer onto a high heat to help just really get that fabric dye into the fabric. And I did 15 to 20 minute sessions of drying it between my rinses. Here's a picture of the fabric all laid out. It doesn't really show very well, so I took another picture next to the fabric on my cutting table. Here's a progress picture of the costume. There's the finished costume. And here's a video of the costume all done. I'm really happy with how it turned out. Wasn't totally sure if it was going to work halfway through the process, but as I said, the fabric I had originally wanted to buy was not a possibility anymore, so I had to improvise and come up with a solution since I could not find a tie-dye mesh in the color I wanted in the US. Follow my other videos. I will be showing some more sewing videos and how I grade patterns in the near future, so would love for you to like and follow my page. Thanks for listening.